Man, oh, dude, I'm just so happy to be here.
Thanks.
I think the last time we were on an intellect salon call, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the session, I was just like, dude, can we like jam for a bit? And like, you just hit record, and then we just like spoke for like 10 minutes, and then that was like so trippy.
That was fun, yeah. And
Yeah.
that kind of spontaneous thing is best, I feel, because like the mood that you have in the moment is always precious. And then I often find like I guess it's good to make plans, but like when you defer things, they just start to feel like an obligation, and you lose the sense of what you originally was gonna do it for. So if you can do it on the day off, I think that's great.
Yeah. And also, there's this aspect of, the moment you schedule something, there's this whole build up to it, and then
Yeah,
like, right, just like, oh my God, like there's this level of tension that just kicks in.
yeah.
Like, there's always a power dynamic, right? Like, for example, even like this
Mm,
call. So the guy who actually brought us together on this particular call is a guy I just met in Bangalore. His name is Prince.
mm-hmm.
And he started coming over for my writing session. So I have these like weekly writing calls where I just invite people. We catch up at a cafe. I throw out a prompt, and then we just spend 3 hours writing about it. Right, like
Nice.
everyone's in their own little
How many
corner.
people do you get in your?
A handful, like around like yeah, 4 or 5 people,
Nice.
sometimes a little more.
I
And
like this under 12. I think like once you're more than that, it becomes like an event, and then it's like Whereas like 5 people, you can all have dinner together. Everyone can follow the conversation. I think that's a nice number. Anyway, you saying?
yeah, it's like I like that. This is something I've been thinking about a lot. Okay, like I'm like this whole seniors thing that you have written a lot about, right? Like I'm like that. What's the minimum viable number we need for a seniors, right? Like there's a single person, there's a buddy pair. Like right now, there's two of us together on this call. It's like a buddy pair. There's two of us. We're jamming, we're just recording, we're creating something together. If we get in a bunch of people in a small circle, like that's the next level of scale, the way I see it. And so I've been trying to do this thing with like minimum viable community in person, right? Like a lot of these
Nice.
things are IRL. I want people to take that friction, lose the convenience of online travel, 2 hours in traffic, reach this place, feel that little awkwardness, dude. I don't know these guys. Who are these guys? Like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
It's a little mischievous from my side to kind of like pull people, do that, and
Nice.
like, well,
Yeah.
like I'm curious, like, because this is something that's so different from the online world. Like, there's this scale of reaching out to so many people en masse. Like, my God, we can just like share our thoughts with everyone across the world right now,
Mm-hmm.
or jump on a Zoom call of 1,000 people. But then there's something about a spatial environment, sharing that space, watching each other in person, feeling that nervous ticks, that little energy bubble that we are building.
Mm-hmm.
I am really curious. I feel like the more the world is moving towards an online paradigm where everything is online, everything is artificial, like how do we create these little pockets of visceral experience where we can feel each other, right? As much as listen and talk to each other.
Yeah. So like, are you asking me what I think about it?
Yeah, I'm just curious about your experiences because you are powerfully online, right? You're there, your presence is online. Like one of the things I truly admire about you is this aspect of being prolific on the internet and constantly putting out, like in your own timeline, it's been decades of you being on the net, right? On your own blog, on Twitter, on YouTube, constantly putting yourself out there, sharing and interacting. How's your experience been between these two paradigms of being in a small circle, physical environment of interaction versus a large community online experience of interaction?
Right. I don't know if it would surprise some people, but I mean, I imagine it might surprise some people, but I think people who know me well wouldn't be surprised. But like, I actually have always had a preference for in-person meetings. And when I was, so like for me, the big thing in my life about this was when I was a teenager and I used to play in bands. And that's a very, sweaty, maybe like fifth. My favorite gigs were always like 50 to 100 people in a small space. Like that's really intimate, and you can see everyone. It's not so large that the crowd feels kind of anonymous. A thing that's always been kind of sad for me a little bit is when you go to a concert of a very, very large artist in a very large venue, and that's its own special experience. Like, I've seen like U2 and Muse and Foo Fighters. Like it's great. It's a scale of experience. It's almost like you're experiencing like a cosmic event, like a big thing. But it's difficult for it to be intimate. You don't feel the people as individuals so much. It feels like, oh, we are a mob, basically, like a friendly mob maybe. And like you'll see some people be kind of like jostling about, and it's impersonal. I don't like that so much. Whereas some of my favorite live music experiences were so intimate. It's like maybe in a bar, and there's like 20 people, and you can feel everyone vibing, and that just feels great. Yeah, in fact, I mean, before live music for me, I would just hang out with my friends, I guess. Like, so so in Singapore we have these apartment blocks, and
Hmm.
on the ground floor we call it the void deck. There's like stone tables and chairs, and me and my friends we would meet at one of our friends' houses, void decks, right? And we just sit there every day for months. I think we overdid it. Like we were like 19, 20 years old, don't know what we want to do with our lives yet. So we just meet every day. And you can't go too far with that. But there is something you get out of the experience of like just and I didn't realize that it was a valuable thing until I met people who have like a lot of social anxiety from just not having that face-to-face experience with people. And so that's like, oh wow, okay, you need some experience. Like you need to really just go and just be with people and talk to people. And the funny thing is, I got married in 2012, which is like wow, 13 years ago. And so my wife and I, we moved from the east part of Singapore to the north, which is like a really inaccessible, it's like out of the way. It's just very difficult to get to. And so and I started my job, and it just became difficult to make time to hang out with people. And now that I look back, I'm like, what am I talking about? Like, and I was like, now I'm a parent, and I didn't have kids back then. But it's so funny how that little extra like half an hour of friction can mean that you just stop seeing people, and then you look back and you're like, I was young. I could have traveled. I could have organized events. I could have, like hosted like a pizza weekend. Every Saturday, a bunch of us can go and have pizza somewhere. And I had the capacity to do it, but I did do it a little bit. So when you're telling a story, it simplifies. I did do it a little bit, like
Yeah.
I I wouldn't go a year without meeting people. So like every few months, I'll be, hey, let's all go to this person's thing, or let's all go to that thing. But if I could do my 20s again, I think I would be so much more aggressive in organizing in-person meetups. Again, I think the friction to get it started is a bit high, but once
Yeah.
you have it, the striking thing to me is always how relieved people are to be in a there's the initial awkwardness of like people trying to figure each other out, but once people get a sense of, oh, like how we can laugh about these things together, like you understand, or you're not judging me. Once you have that sense, people really relax, and
Yeah.
it's very difficult to have that kind of relaxation in the open internet on the web for multiple reasons. One is there's no body language, and everyone seems more cold and stiff and hard and unfriendly in text. You can learn to type in a way that alludes to that warmth,
Mm.
but even if you do that, there's no guarantee that you don't know how the other person is receiving it. All of the things conspire to make the wider internet kind of a cold, if not hostile, just kind of a lot in large areas a bit hostile. But even in the non-hostile areas, it's just kind of tense, right? You don't know when someone's going to come along and swear at you, and
Yeah.
you might not realize that it's making you kind of, oh, I have to explain myself, I have to contextualize myself, I have to give my reasons or whatever. But when you're with people in person, it's just so. I always Every time I meet a small group of people, I always feel people are so nice, people are so warm, they're so squishy, they're so human. And yeah, so I'm going to move out of my house finally at the end
Ooh.
of like sometime this year. So I've been living in this particular house for like 12, 13 years. I'm going to move back to the east, which is where like a lot of my old childhood friends and stuff are. And I definitely intend to like host people at my house like probably every, I want to say every week, but maybe every second week, or like at least every month, hopefully every
Yeah.
second week. And I just feel like it's a gift when you can invite people over and you can curate a warm vibe, especially I think for younger people who are like still finding themselves, figuring out their voice, figuring out what they care about, like just being able to be present amongst slightly older people who have their shit together a little bit. Again, it's all relative, right? Ultimately, nobody has their shit together. We can be the people that we wish we had in our lives. So I wish I had like a slightly older big brother figure who would be like, hey Visa, come and join me in this thing. Talk to my wife, play with my son, like that kind of thing. And yeah, so I'm really looking forward to doing that. I do. So I am not like I know some people who are like online totalit. I don't want to say totalitarian, but like online maximalist. Like VR will be everywhere, and then we won't need to meet in person anymore. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's like it's a good thing to have access to it if you have nothing, but it's like even if we somehow if there's somebody made like a nutrition pill such that you take the pill and you don't need to eat at all, that would be great for a lot of people. And I can see myself taking it like on days where I want to work and whatever, and like not be distracted. But I love food. Like food is delicious. People like people interacting with people is like that. It's so nourishing done properly. And there's all this like so even on a video call like right now, like I can see your image, you can see my image, but we're not.
Yeah.
There's a lag, there's a glitch. We don't get
Yeah.
to I don't get to like slap your shoulder. I don't get to. We are approximating, but you know
Yeah.
it when you're in person. You're like, oh, so like video is better than plain text. But yeah, I do think that if there is to be joy and healing, and I mean, I argue with myself in my head about this all the time. So like, it is possible to kind of have approximate versions of those things, like poetry. I feel like the best highest level of internet friendship is kind of like poets interacting with other poets, and they can be
Mm-hmm.
making fun of things, or they can be joking or serious and everything. If you read some of the letters that like people wrote each other in like hundreds of years ago, it's so intimate and wise and clever and funny, and you're like, yeah, that is real human kinship in text, and they have to put in
Yeah.
so much effort to like encode their thoughts and feelings that the other person can receive. And I do believe that online we can try to do that, but it's just as human beings we have all this evolutionarily designed laughter and body language and
Yeah.
facial expression. There's so much nuance and richness there, and it's just a joy to inhabit it yourself and to demonstrate to other people that it's possible. Like again, it's like one of my favorite speeches was by Karl Polnick, he was like the person in charge of the Boston Conservatory, like a music school. And he was explaining to the freshmen, like there was a freshman address, and he was explaining to the students and their parents like why music is important. And he described it as like it's like being spiritual first responders. Like so if you are a medical first
Damn.
responder, if you're a medical first responder, someone's injured and you go and fix them and you save them, and like it's very obvious what you're doing. But like so for artists, it's not so immediately obvious because you're not like some people say it's frivolous, it's unimportant. Like who cares about poetry? Except so it's unimportant if you don't need it, but when you need it. And so Ethan Hawke has a great bit, like when a parent dies or you fall in love, like some extreme experience, good or bad, and you're struggling to make sense of what that feeling is. Like that's when art is so powerful. And so same with the thing about music and intimacy, and that is just it's just why did I even bring that up? It's just I feel like it's the domain, the highest bandwidth domain we can experience. Usually, I mean, like, there's some exceptions or whatever, but we were meant for like hundreds of thousands of years. Like art was people dancing around a fire and singing, and we just so wired for that. I think people who've never experienced that don't realize what they're missing out on, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it feels good very deeply to participate in something that we were clearly made for. And so it's a gift to create these little spaces where you can
Like
give
a
that
minimum
gift to
viable
others.
scene.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, that's so cool. I mean, when your first scene, when you move into your new place and you create your first scene, I'm gonna fly down to Singapore
Oh,
just for that.
yeah, I mean, I hesitate to say that you should spend so much money on a plane ticket or whatever. But if you want to drop by, like I'll be here. So I'll be happy to
Awesome,
receive you.
man.
I mean,
Probably
it's
just
mhm.
I'll probably just swim across the sea.
Yeah, slightly complicated by having a kid, but we can
Yeah,
arrange things. Yeah.
yeah, man. I mean, like this is exactly when you have a kid, right? Like this whole idea of having a child
Hmm.
is the consistency of having an in-person scene all the time, right?
Right.
For example, you have this person with you all the time around you,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a scene that never ends. It just started and then it doesn't end. It's just there. I mean, like it's it's waxing and waning, the intensity and the intimacy of the experience, but it's perpetually, it's consistent, it's constant, it's in your face, and it's so visceral. It's one of those experiences that is like you're feeling the child, you're not just watching the child, like all of your senses are alive. And there's like this deep sense of kinship and connection that it's not just a label that this is a sense of ownership, that this is my child, but it's an actual visceral feeling of connection, right? And I feel like a lot of times, even in in-person interactions, even if I don't know the person I'm with, like a minimum viable connection is just a hug. Like if I can give someone a hug, we needn't even have a conversation. I always try to do that in these in-person meetings. I'm just like, try to start with a hug, and then after that, it's like you can just sit on your corner, you can just sit at your table, and you write in, in solitude. We're socially connected, yet you are creating in solitude, right? You're in your at your own table. We're in a public cafe, so people can, feel free to get up and walk out, or someone else might join in. But there's that somehow some sort of a minimum physical viable connection, and I feel like a hug kind of does the trick, because a handshake is still relatively cold. It doesn't offer a lot of warmth and affection, but a hug kind of like you just melt, right? It's just like, even if you're like, I'm not too comfortable with it, but like, you know after a while you're like, "Ah, fuck it, like, come on in, let's have another one of that." And I feel like it's kind of like a lot of what I'm trying to do with these events is like a mix of a hug and a huddle, right? Like a huddle is more like a aggressive, a masculine, sporty energy. Bro, let's do this. We're gonna crush this. We're gonna publish this newsletter. We're gonna write a big ass essay by the end of these 3 hours. Like there's this powerful, aggressive, let's do something energy and vibe. And then there's also the hug, which is like, bro, I got you. It's cool if you don't finish the writing in 3 hours. It's cool if you don't publish it. It's cool. I got you. We're here. There's a more supportive, gentle, passionate vibe, right? So I'm kind of like thinking of these as like a hug and a huddle, like, trying to balance those
Nice.
two energies.
Yeah, that's a
So,
very good, nurturing and challenging at the same time. It's a very good balance.
yeah. Like, there's another event thing that I run on a weekly basis. It's like for bikers, right? So the whole bunch of bikers get together. And I keep laughing and joking that this is probably the only biking group in the whole world where nobody bikes. We just actually meet there, grab coffee, and do nothing. We don't ride our bikes. Because I'm like, when we
That's
actually
funny.
ride our bike, it's funny because like it's like when we're actually riding our bikes, we can't really talk, right? We got our eyes on the road, we're going somewhere, we're going places, we're seeing the sights, right? And if there is any sort of intercom communication, it's just basically to warn each other, hey, watch out, be careful, or just say, oh, look at that beautiful thing. They're just a few pointers and a few, you don't have a constant conversation going, right? It's a different kind of a connection that happens through activity, and the actual times where you get to converse deep and like build connections and friendships is very little, when you take a break or when you reach your destination. So it's more like an 80-20 thing. 80% of it is the experience, and barely like, 10% of it is actual interaction with each other. So I was like, let's just meet together and we'll do nothing but, have coffee and bakchodi. That's it. We're just going to hang, chat, do absolutely nothing, right? And so it's a very strange thing. I feel like it's kind of like people who come in from that more huddle mentality, we're kind of like slowing them down and bring them into a more hug mentality. And people who come in from more hug connection mentality. We're kind of challenging them, like, the whole writing thing is like, bro, you got like 3 hours, you have to publish at the end of this. And like, it's like there is a little bit of a guillotine pressure there. But it's like, again, it's like a minimum viable publish. You don't have to actually share it on the internet. You just have to share it with one other person. You can either share it with people in the group, you can phone a friend and like share it with them. And you don't have to write like
Nice.
5,000 words. It could just be a 3-line haiku.
Nice. I like that. I like that you have that gradient. I think too often people get hung up on. In fact, even now, so I've been writing for a very long time, and even then, I sometimes freeze up in my own process. I realize because I have been trying to write something for everyone or for like a large audience, and then it's like, oh, I got to worry about this, I got to worry about that. And the solution to that, and again, people come to me with that problem, and then I'm like, oh yeah, just have you shared it with someone, like one person? And yet, when I'm in the middle of my own process, I can forget to ask myself that question, which is like, have you shared it? Like, you should share with one person, or like, and often that will be enough to, if there's any glaring thing that you've overlooked, they might see it and point out so you can fix it, or anything you're unsure about, you see how people respond. Like, there's no reason why things need to be all or nothing. Right? I think all or nothing thinking in a lot of domains causes a lot of stress and anxiety, and like we have the ability to, again, like you don't have to, you know um in every case, like you don't have to start with a massive event. You can just have a small thing. You don't have to write a massive thing. You can start with small. Everything can start small. I think some people have, like, their ego is tied up with, like, oh, I should, like, doing it small is, like, for,
Yeah.
they might, like, I'm this, or it might not even be about themselves. It might be like, this thing is too important for me to do it small. But like, if you're not doing it, then you're frozen. So progress is always that way. So in fact, I look, when I look at my history of like exercise, like lifting weights to be, and when I was a teenager or in my 20s, I'm like, am I want to work out for vanity? Like, I just want a nice muscles or whatever. And now I have a child, so I have to carry my son, and he's getting heavier every month. He's getting heavy now. So I have a real reason to be strong. And when I look at the
Hell yeah.
history of my strength training progress or lack thereof, I'm coming around to the idea that I used to want to lift more as soon as I could. And I'm very sure now that that kept me from growing, because it's just something about the neural response and the amount of your muscle tears, and it's just the ecology of anything can't withstand excess force or excess pressure or excess whatever. There's a sweet spot, the right amount of thing. And I wonder if I could extrapolate beyond that and be like, many people who want to be fitter struggle with it because they wish they were fitter than they already are,
Mm.
and they refuse to like admit that to themselves. So that was me. I was like that. So I don't want to admit that, oh, I used to be, when I was in the army, I could run so far, and now I can't, and so I'm gonna try. So you push yourself too hard, and then you get injured or you get exhausted. Even if you don't get injured, it's like you just get really beaten up by the process, and you don't want to do it
Yeah.
anymore. And then you feel bad about it, and then it's just, whereas, like, go for a nice long walk. That's a start. And with like push-ups, I think the idea of doing like a half push-up feels unmasculine in some ways.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to do it, you can then do a lot more, and then the gradient helps you go up. So it's like thinking in gradients. I think it requires putting down your ego a little bit. I've heard the same thing about like language learning. Like,
Mhm.
people learn languages a lot faster if they imitate children, and it feels stupid, right? It's like, instead of learning the complex grammar and stuff, just have very, very childish, simple phrases that you use in a few different ways, and then you have a bedrock of understanding. So I wonder how many of the things that adults say to themselves and each other is like, oh, I can't learn that, I can't learn piano, I can't learn to dance because I'm too old. It's like, no, I mean, well, in a way they're correct, but it's not the number of years on your age. It's that you have gotten frozen to the idea of like failing and doing
Yeah.
something silly and doing
Yeah.
and looking stupid, and all of those things.
Yeah.
And again, once you have a child, you really see this super clearly. Like, everyone very casually encourages children to keep trying. So like, when a kid's struggling to walk and he falls down, everyone's just like, oh yeah, keep going, you'll get it, don't worry about it, like, just keep. And it's like, why can't, if we did that for everything, I just feel that we could accelerate. Everyone can just it could just be so amazing. So I want to see that.
How many times does your kid fall while trying to walk? Like, this is something that I'm very curious about. Like, in a day,
So it
like,
happened. So he went from crawling to walking quite suddenly, I would say. I mean, I'm not sure. So
damn.
he didn't crawl that much. So okay, the phases are at first they can't even sit up by themselves. Like so their
Yeah.
necks are not yet. So eventually you notice when their necks are sturdy enough that if you put them on their butt sitting on the floor, they can sit or like just like that. They sit on their butts sitting up. And then from that at some point they start crawling. I can't even remember the dates specifically, but I think about like 5 6 months they start crawling in a very weird, and every child is different in their weirdness. Like they might drag one leg behind and you might think, oh, that's not good, like why are they using only one, but it doesn't matter because they'll figure it out. And when he first like stood and took his first couple of steps, I think that might have been like maybe 3 months ago, 2.5 months ago. So before they start toddling about, they will like hold on to objects, or they'll hold on
Hmm.
to the crib or the wall or something, and they just stand there, and then they go back down, and then yeah, it's very very incremental. And what I was surprised by was I thought he would struggle with like the first. So when he first took like, I think first you see like 3 steps, like 1 2 3, and then he sits back down. And then you think, oh, he's gonna be like that for a few weeks, and then it's gonna be like 7 8 steps for a few weeks, and then it's gonna be. But no, like he went from like 3 steps to like 10-ish, and then like he's just walking. Now he's just walking now all over the place, and he's like climbing upstairs, and
Damn.
yeah, he hasn't started jumping yet, so he's still toddling. It's a very
Yeah.
specific. It's a very
Yeah.
specific like their center of gravity is not. You know, it's easy to forget, but kids have very big heads. Like
Yeah.
if like so when you see a child put his hands over his head, like his arms, like if an adult human were to put their hands all the way up, that's how big your head would be if you're a toddler. If you think about it, because they start out with their heads very big and their body is very
Yeah.
small.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when your head is so big and your body is so small, just imagine if your head was huge, right? Like it's
Gotcha.
difficult to stand straight. So they're really struggling and they're really trying their best, and it's really you see like their hand and finger dexterity. They learn to start manipulating objects. The first time you see a child like they want an object that's on something else, like maybe you have like a tray and they want to reach a toy at the end of the tray, and you see them like manipulate themselves a little bit and then get the tray and then pull the tray. You look at it, wow, where did he learn that? Like, is it innate? Is it trial and error? Like it's remarkable when you see them acting with intention. One thing, witnessing a not even 2 year old, right? So like 1.5 year old child, witnessing a child go after what they want. It almost kind of radicalizes me further on every time you meet an adult saying something like, I don't know what I want. I'm convinced that we suppress our innate feeling of what we want and we intellectualize it. We're like, oh, so you can think of all the things like someone scolds you and says, oh, you shouldn't want that, it's bad for you. Or, your teachers or your parents say, you got to sit down and shut up and don't like pay attention to this. And so they learn to suppress we all learn to suppress our desires and our feelings. And
Yeah.
like just being around a child, they'll just they'll look around, they'll decide they want something, they'll just go after it, and it's so, I mean, with no fear for their own safety even, right? And that we were all like that once, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And knowing that, it comes to the point where now even when I hear myself say, I don't know what I want, I'm like, what bullshit am I on to myself right now, right? What am I afraid of? And it really does, but you also think about the experience, we really do become opaque to ourselves, which is so
Hmm.
kind of scary. Like
Yeah.
I do believe, so in a way it's slightly bullshit, but it's true to them, to the person, to the adult saying, I don't know what I want to do. It's not like they know and then they're lying, but like the self-suppression that comes in, it's like a fog, right? Like it's a fog over yourself. And then some people think you got to go out and find something to teach you how to know what you want. But no, it's already inside. It was always there. It's just you have to kind of allow the fog to dissipate or settle, or there's a bunch of things you can do. You can try and triangulate and stuff. I think even before I had a kid, when I was working on my book Introspect, what clicked for me was like a light bulb moment of You don't need to know what you want to do what you want. You can do it not knowing as in like intellectual, verbal. Oh, I want to be a gardener, so I'm gonna plant flowers. Like you might just your body knows, your fingers know what you want. And even as a writer, I found like again when I think too much and I start trying to plan and plot what I want to write, it gets stiff, it gets boring, and I get frustrated by what is happening. But if you just set some vague intention and don't care too much about it, and you just go off running in the text,
Yeah.
along the way, whatever in you wants to come out will almost intrude and like interrupt. So like you will digress. So you'll be like, okay, today I want to write about you know uh running a scene or whatever, and then along the way I'm just like, you know, isn't it interesting that children's desires? Well, that wasn't what I set out to do, but it's clearly what I wanted to say, right? So it
Yeah.
comes out, and
Yeah.
I didn't really have much of a say in that. It was, so I couldn't have told you before the call, hey, I want to talk to you about this thing. I don't know. I did not know what I want to talk about, but it just comes up. And so, and that's life, right? So much of life is just what comes up. Like, and we don't know. So there's a mystery to it, which makes it exciting, right? Because if we knew in advance all the things that we want and all the things that we care about, like, it's boring. It's like, it's already done. It's a solved
Yeah,
problem.
there's no fun to that, right? Like I think this is the magic where kids like, they're just like you said, it's a will and skill kind of a balance, right? Like if I want to do something, I just do it. And like this, the scale of good, bad, or ugly doesn't even really matter to a kid because the kid is just like, I'm doing it, right? Like that's all that matters. And the kid isn't even thinking about, I am doing this. There's no sense of
Yeah.
ownership of the practice, let alone the accomplishment or the achievement at the end of the practice.
Yeah.
The child isn't even perceiving the fact that it is actually doing something.
Yeah.
It's just happening
And that's why
100%.
so many great artists independently all say that genius is about a return to childhood. And I have a friend, my friend's husband, but we're friends basically. He is a very good illustrator, like he's very, very skilled. And he has like a 2-year-old son. And he says, I saw his Instagram stories, he's saying he was watching his son draw, and he said, I'm genuinely like envious of my son. Who and you look at children's drawings, and like to the lay person who is conditioned to think, oh, a very complex drawing is beautiful and a child's drawing is not. But here's an artist with a refined sense of aesthetic, and he's saying that there is a freedom and irreverence to the child's drawings that inspires him, right? To try, how do I re-inhabit that such immediate connection from the like heart and the limbic system or whatever straight to the page. And it's just so on. You'll never look at a child's drawing and say this looks dishonest
Yeah.
or this looks fake or this looks forced. Like, no, the child drew what the fuck he wanted to draw. And yeah, there's a how do we re-access that kind of pure channel direct to the source kind of
Yeah.
thing? It's
Remember the
challenging, yeah.
Picasso quote? You remember the
Which was
Picasso
it?
quote? It took me 5 years to learn to paint like the masters, but it took me a lifetime to learn to paint like a child.
Yeah, that's man, that's really it's true. I'm still early in my life, right, in the grand scheme of things, but I feel like with each passing year, I see more and more that all the technical stuff you can learn is impressive at some level, but it's really like the heart song that again, when I look at my body of work, the things that really just kind of shine is when I happen to be not even thinking about the work, right? I was like responding to a friend. Like several of my best posts are like a friend asks a question or they're troubled by something. I'm like, oh, I got you. Let me just write this thing for you. Here you go. And then I look at it later on. I'm like, shit, that's much better than anything I try to make. Like when I sit at my desk, I'm gonna do some nice writing. Like that's challenging.
Yeah.
But in a way, I guess both things are part of the process. So it's not a waste to sit at your desk and try to get better at your craft, because that builds the chops for when inspiration strikes, when the moment is ripe or whatever, then you really just come up blasting, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the beauty about kids, right? They have this malleability to what they're doing, right? They can go wide, they can like spread themselves wide and do like a number of things at the same time. And then they can just go deep into one thing and just ignore everything else for like that obsessive attention span on one singular thing that they're just bullishly chasing down, or the next minute they could just drop that obsession and just like pick up something else and just start playing with it.
I mean,
And I feel,
if you ever seen a toddler throw something away, I'll try and embody it, right? So just look at a pen, right? He'll look at a pen. Like, I didn't even do it properly. So you saw me like toss it. Like that's not a toddler. It disappears from their attention. Even the way a toddler tosses, just it's dead to them. It no longer exists. It's just gone. And like uh, if there's a video of like Obama doing a mic drop at his White House correspondence speech, and some people say, "Oh, that's such a cool moment," but it's slightly tarred by one thing. He holds the mic, and then he drops it, and then
mm,
he looks at it go down. The moment you look at it, it's not really a mic drop anymore. You're supposed to drop while you're still looking at whoever you're talking to. And like
yes.
children have mic drop moments non-stop. They're always everything that they take, they just drop. And part of it is, I guess, they don't have to be responsible for what happens next, or they don't care to be yet. But it is so amazing to witness that like a child will be done with something completely. It's just, and yeah, I look at it, I'm like, on one hand, it's annoying as the person who has to clean up. And yeah, another thing about having is like when you have like a people sometimes ask me what's the most useful thing you've heard or read about parenting, and mine is very stupid. It's kind of mundane, but like I saw someone say once your kid starts eating solid food, you're gonna be cleaning up messes at a rate that you've never cleaned up before. So like when you don't have a child, maybe like once or twice or three times a year there'll be a big mess, like you spill some food and say, "Oh my god, what a mess! I gotta clean this up." That happens like 3 or 4 times a year. When you have a young toddler, it's every day, and I'm grateful for that person who wrote that because it's mentally prepared me for it. And at the same time, when you clean up a mess every single day, it's kind of a spiritual practice. It's kind of like no matter how good you do the cleanup, if you do a very very good job of cleaning up, tomorrow there's another mess anyway. Like there's no way to do a cleanup so good that there's no mess tomorrow. And yet every mess, a lot of messes look bad. They look, oh my god, what a big mess! How the hell am I gonna deal with this? But when you have to clean it anyway, so you clean it, and then when you're done, you're like, huh, that wasn't actually that bad. It looked way worse than it was, but it's like you pick up the big pieces, you sweep together the thing, you get the tissue, you get as long as you have materials on hand. So if you don't have any materials, then that's trouble, right? And like it's such an analogy for anything else you want to do. Like if you want to work on something, it seems big and insurmountable, but it's just there's some number of steps. It's finite, right? And you can, or if the thing that you're working on is infinite, you can carve up a finite amount. And so, I'm kind of grateful to my kid for making me clean up a mess every single day. I mean, I would prefer it if he didn't, but like, it does change you a little bit. I mean, and I guess you can have that experience in some other context. Like everyone's life is different, so there might be some context in which you have to clean up after yourself or after other people or something. But there's something about the mess of the and so I feel that living is a creative act. Like just to situate yourself in your life, in your social environment, in the time that you're in, all of that. Like, what does it mean? Who am I being? All of that is a creative act, and a child is learning everything from scratch. So even learning to appreciate the food that we all take for granted, like whatever is, just rice and beans and it's really simple stuff. To a child, each new thing is a completely foreign universe, right? And they have to learn to appreciate that. And they have to learn how to use their fingers and mouth and how to swallow. They have to learn how to do these things. And the mess that results is obviously, I mean, okay, it's not actually obvious, but like when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, and it becomes obvious from thinking about it, I guess, or it's obvious to me now. um that that is the prerequisite mess to learning and to the creative process. Like you cannot learn to do something without doing it wrong.
Yeah.
How do you learn to hold a cup, right? If you've
Yeah.
never held a cup before, you have to hold it wrong. So you have to make, and like I was a very picky eater as a child, and I was very late to being able to feed myself properly, and I was very ashamed about that. Whereas also when I was like 7, 6, like my mom would still feed me, and my siblings would make fun of me, and I would make fun of myself. Like, why are you as a like older child still being fed like a baby, kind of? And I realized it's a lot of it has to do with that. I mean, it's complicated, but like it was inconvenient for my parents, or for, I think we had a helper at the time, and so the helper used to feed me, so it gets more and more complicated than that. I To learn to do something, you have to tolerate the mess of the process.
Yeah.
And again, messes are not that bad. They look bad for a while, but it's manageable. But you have to know this, and that's where I think a good teacher, a good parent, a good mentor can guide someone through. They're like, hey, you're gonna try, you're gonna fail. It's gonna be ugly and messy in some ways, but that's fine. It's okay. It's part of the process. I'll help you clean up. You'll learn how to clean up, and we'll do it again. And then you try it a bit differently. You try it a bit whatever. And same for people who are afraid to date, or people who are afraid of anything. It's always, you're afraid of the mess you're gonna make, and like
Yep.
how
Yep.
bad is the mess gonna be. How But like, that's life. Like, to live is to create mess, and to mature is to deal with the mess. But that doesn't mean you stop creating, or you stop helping people create. And so all of this just from cleaning up after a child. It's it, and like, it makes, I feel like I have some privilege here, where, whether it's luck or skill or whatever, I spent a lot of my younger years. What is that? Is there like a Pooh bear? It's so cute.
I have no idea. So we actually, like, I've got a bunch of these things lying around. Like, the
Mm-hmm.
whole idea of a mess, right? Like,
Right, nice.
strewing the
Yeah,
place around with stuff like this.
that's
I
the
feel
done.
like just keeping that messy space around me
Mm,
kind of stimulates my brain to stay out of the perfection,
nice.
trap,
Yeah,
right?
so
Like,
again, my wife and I are looking for a house. We've found the one that we want, I think. But so in the process of finding it, we've been to a lot of other people's houses, and
mhm.
it's funny because if you're the difference between house hunting when you're going to buy a house versus like meeting your friends, most of your friends are probably kind of similar to you, like within some range. But when you go like house shopping by a third party agent and stuff, you go to people's houses who are completely different than you. And now I went to one house where the guy, I think, is a toy collector, like a serious his whole house is just full of toys, like in displays and stuff. It's very intense. And then there was this other lady who was like, she's like a she loves designer bags, I guess. And the toy house was like, it's curated. There's like stands and cupboards and everything, but it feels foreboding in that there's like, I'm in this house, but this house is really like a museum of toys. Like, very, whoa, like, how do you live like this? And then I went to the other lady's house. This lady is like very fashionable, very stylish, and it's a very, like satin curtains, very, like, everything is like shades of gray, shades of brown. It's visually it's beautiful, but you go there and you're like, I'm wearing a like I don't fit this aesthetic. This place is meant for, like, and all her handbags are on display very beautifully. And it's like, this place looks gorgeous, but I can't relax. It's too perfect. It's like my presence here is spoiling what you've set up here. You've set up a space where it's a testament to. It's like, it feels like, you go to like a Taj Mahal. Like, the house, the interior of a house is like the Taj Mahal. And I'm like, it's nice to see the Taj Mahal, but you don't want
It's
to
a tomb.
live there. You Yeah, it's a tomb. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's like a mausoleum to her interests. And I go there and I'm like, this is where, and you look at those beautiful designer handbags, and like, I would rather live in the place where the handbags were made. And you go to like, and it's like Gucci or Dior or whatever, but you go to the artisan's workshop, it's not a pristine, perfect
It's a
thing. It's a
mess.
workshop. There's like glue, and there's the leather straps, and there's the tools, and that I can relax much more in a place like that, because my state of imperfection and my stuff lying around, you can even look at my bookshelves. It's like a painting. There's like a ruler there. It's it's not perfectly pristine, but like, you can feel comfortable opening it, taking something out, putting something in, and like, know that I'm not going to be bothered if you change a little bit of the mess, because it's a mess. It's alive. It's not a tomb. That's So that was really it. I mean, I'm grateful for those experiences, because it clarified for me what I want in a home. And I want a home to feel alive, not like a tomb. That is a good point. It should
Yeah.
feel like a work in progress. People should feel comfortable coming along and participating, and not worried that they're gonna mess up your perfect life.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
goes for far beyond houses, right? Like it's just
Yeah, it's
you
up
know
here as well, right? Like a lot of times, like when you're having a conversation with people, like a child doesn't think of portraying its speech, its thoughts in a way that comes across as perfect, politically correct, or like precise, or like, it's just dropping out thoughts and ideas and concepts without thinking about the consequences and consequences in terms of how it is perceived, right? Like every conversation a child has is free flowing, is like I'm trying to have conversations as an adult. Like before I have like 10 lines of conversation, there will be 100-page disclaimer about how this should be taken in what spirit and how, I don't intend to step on your toes. Whereas, like, there's this abandon that a child has when it communicates, right? Which is messy. And like you said, like, I could create a mess if I say the wrong things, if I do the wrong things, if I, step on your toes. But how do I exude that vibe where I'm like, I don't intend to do you harm. I'm just here trying to explore my expression. And if I do, then I will stay to fix it, or I will, do what it takes to undo the damage, or I will stay behind to clean up after myself. I feel like this is, as an adult who's trying to be playful or who's trying to keep my inner child alive, like this is a balance that I'm constantly playing with. Like, how do I be irreverent enough to be real and honest, and at the same time be respectful enough to not, hurt someone just because I want to say the things that I want to say. It's like
this is
a very
interesting to hear.
delicate balance.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear this from you because I was kind of under the impression that you had that very much in. I mean, not to imply that you don't have it in control. No, I think this is one of those cases where the person who's good at it, when you ask them about it, they'll describe the nature of the tension, which sounds like they're struggling, but it's it's how it is, right? Same for like so, like I remember it's funny when I've written about my creative process, and like I get these guys who haven't written anything much, and they come and try to help me by giving me advice, and it's cute, I appreciate it. I appreciate the gesture. Sometimes a beginner can tell a master something that is what they need to hear, right? So I'm grateful for it. But it's interesting to me that a person who's good at something describing the tension of what it takes to be good can be interpreted as someone who is struggling. There's like struggling well, and there's struggling, I'm drowning, please help me, like I don't know what to do, right? And yeah, it's I guess it's interesting to just hear you describe the tension, which I'm aware of, and I know I would have guessed that you're aware of it as well, but it's interesting to hear.
Yeah.
And I think it's an eternal tension, right? You can't it's like like again, you manage the tension artfully one day, it's there again tomorrow. It's not gonna, you can't solve it permanently
Yeah.
until you
Yeah.
die, right? So it's like
Yeah.
life is tension, and like no one is perfectly relaxed except corpses.
Yes.
So it's like, and yet you can be too tense in the other direction, so it's always a dance.
Yeah, it's always a dance. I love that. Like, it's like, and then there's the multiplayer game, right? Like, as much as I'd like to think, okay, I got this dialed down and I have this all sorted. But the beauty of things, it keeps the game exciting for me as well, is the fact that it's a multiplayer game. The scenario changes. Like, I have this trifecta of playgrounds, playmates, and playbooks, right? So it's like the moment I'm in a
Yes.
different playground, everything changes.
Yeah.
My game is dependent on my comfort with my playground. So if I'm in a different playground, I'm again on the edge. If I'm
Yeah.
with different playmates, I'm again on the edge. If we're playing by a different playbook, I'm again on the edge. And that's what keeps it exciting. That's what makes it fun. And then, the spectrum of polarity is always there. Sometimes you have super friendly playmates. Sometimes you have super hostile playmates. Like with the pillow fight, it's so crazy. Like I was doing these pillow fights on the street. I would just randomly walk up people, hand them a pillow, and start fighting. Some of them would be like super gentle and playful, and they would really have to be coaxed into actually trying to hit someone with it. They would barely be touching each other with it. And some would just swing so hard they could just knock someone down and give them a concussion, right? And it's like, as a person who is doing that myself, I would be able to artfully dance and play around that. But if I'm orchestrating it for someone else, where I'm giving two different people pillows, and I'm just like orchestrating the event. I'm just chaperoning that experience. It's going to be like very difficult to negotiate that experience as a third party, right?
Mm.
And like, so these are the things that I'm always thinking of when I'm hosting the scene and I'm like trying to keep things together. Like, how do I maintain a safe space while also creating that danger zone where people can be challenged, pushed to their edges, play out of the comfort zone? And if that gets a little too much, how do you retreat back into your safe space? How do we keep these two places in the playground, a safe space as well as a danger zone within that playground, right? And that's the challenge.
Yeah, and the interesting that you bring up playgrounds again. It's interesting. You can go to a literal playground with children in it, and you can watch how they do it, and they are good at it. It's funny that kids are good at it, and adults can be bad at it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like we used to be good at it, and then we again we suppress ourselves, or we get in our heads, or we like so again, I brought my son to a playground a few days ago, and he's typically the smallest kid on the playground because like he's barely left babyhood, he's a toddler, and so it's fascinating to watch how the older kids and other parents whatever navigate. There are like two boys on bicycles, and then he's toddling behind them, and then one boy says to the other boy, "Baby alert, baby alert." And I'm like, that's interesting. Like they have some history there of an understanding of, okay, you got to look out for the baby and not knock the baby over for whatever reason. And there was this slightly older girl that I could tell from context that she had an older sister. So it's like one girl older than my son and another girl maybe what. So I think the younger girl's like 3 or 4 and the older girl's like 6 or 7. And so the younger girl is playing peekaboo with my son a few times, and then they were running around each other a little bit. Not, I mean, it's just kind of just going in circles. And then they left. And then later on, I bumped into them. Turns out their mom runs like a pastry shop nearby, and I'm bringing my son with me. And the older girl says to the younger girl, "Hey, it's your friend." And I'm like, that's what it takes to be a friend. Like a few rounds of peekaboo, and you run in a circle a few times together, friends.
Yes.
That's the beauty of like childhood. It takes us like as adults we intellectualize, oh, what is friendship? What is criteria do you want in a friend? What kind of lives should they have? What kind of jobs should they like? Kids don't give a shit about anything. We are both kids. We're running around the playground. We're friends, and it's those little interactions that it makes me wonder. Like, could there be more affordances for adults? So like children do have the benefit of being like immigrants to adult
Mm.
life, right? They're
Yeah.
new, and so they all recognize each other as we kids have to stick together and we live in the adults world, right? Like, and we forget as adults that that's a very strong feature of childhood. And yet as we have this conversation, it's just dawning on me more and more, our current status quo can't possibly be the best arrangement of all possible elements and of all possible social rituals. Like again, like we've lived in modern civilization in like post-industrial whatever, a couple of 100 years max. And if you include like smartphones and everything, like a decade, 2 decades. Like everything is so new and everything is so hastily put together, right? It's not
Yep.
carefully considered. There's nobody whose job is to be like make society beautiful.
Yep.
Everyone has their own part to play. Surely there must be, and this is exciting to think about, right? There must be opportunities where that we can introduce ideas to people about how to relate to people they've just met, or how to connect. Like it must be possible. I believe it. I don't know what the answer is yet, but even just thinking about it, like how can we better introduce ourselves to someone in a new context, and how can we better make someone feel at home in some context. And I think I'm probably going to do some thinking and writing about this in relation to children, because again, like the children have it figured out for their
Yeah.
domain. Their domain changes as you get into adulthood. Being a person doesn't change, right? So there must be something. I don't know yet, but it's a thought. Thanks for.
Dude, that is so trippy because this is one of the things I use to break the ice when I travel. I ride a lot on my motorcycle across the country, and I speak a lot of languages, but then it's quite crazy because you're wearing a motorcycle jacket, you're wearing a helmet, you're like, you're a strange creature, you look hostile, and I ride solo most of the time, so I'm always a stranger to the environment. One of the things I do to break the ice is I play rock, paper, scissors. I meet someone and I spend like 2 minutes explaining to them the game, and then I'm like, okay, we're gonna play this, and then whether they win or whether I win, it breaks the ice, and then we kind of like figure it out. When I'm having conversations with people, I'm like, I want it to be a physical, visceral engagement that is less cognitive. I don't want to talk about who I am, where I'm from, what I do, where I'm going. Like, it's not as much about the past or the future, but what we can do right now in this moment, right? And I found that like a game is like the easiest way to break the ice, to build warmth, to connect, to relate. And it's amazing because even what how are we in this situation? Like we just jammed after an intellect salon, right? Like that was the first time that we jammed, and then we spoke a little bit on. We've just like barely interacted, literally, compared to even on this call. Like so Prince just reached out to me and he's like, "You and Visa should be on a podcast." So I was like, "Dude, I haven't even like jammed with Visa in like years, and like even our interaction is probably like one Zoom call and like probably three or four messages to and fro on the main timeline. Like that's about it. I am not a Visa stan. I'm not. I don't even. Yeah, I mean, like I'm like one of those freaks. Like I'm like very weird in that sense. I'm so self-absorbed. I'm not even looking at others. But I love what you do. I've written a long. My first Twitter thread was about friendly, ambitious nerd.
Oh man,
Right? Like that
I'm so
was my
glad to hear it.
first thread. I read the book. I got the book. I read the book. I wrote the first thread of that. I was so happy about it. And but I never built a relationship with you. And yet at the same time, the freedom and effortlessness with which we had that post salon 5 minute Zoom call was so free flowing, so fun loving, so delightful. That was the most childlike experience two adults could share in a world of strangers, especially on the internet where the standard assumption is that no, people are hostile, right? Or at the very least, they're not going to be super friendly. And that's exactly why you have friendly, ambitious nerd, right? Like the first thing is the friendly part of it, right? And the other thing that I told him was, I was like, dude, he's got like 90,000 followers. The last thing he's going to do is jump on a podcast with a guy who's like barely on the internet. And I was like, and then I was like thinking about it. I'm like,
You were saying
wow.
that to Prince?
Yeah, I'm saying that to Prince. I was like, wow, like it's amazing that I have these two excuses which are so adult-like. Both these excuses were adult-like. The one is the status game, and one is the sense of I don't know this person well enough to have, a long drawn conversation. And then I realized, oh my God, I have grown up. What the fuck am I? And I was like, I just hopped onto main and I just like quickly tagged you and I'm like, bro, can we do this? And you were like, yeah, right away you were just like down to play. And like that's the kid energy. That's like two of us playing peekaboo in the online world of Twitter. And then we just became friends now. Right? Like that's it. This is us being kids. This is us being those little kids in the playground of Twitter, of the internet, of this new paradigm of the world where we don't need to play the status game. We don't need to know each other's antecedents and where we're going and where we're from and what makes us tick. We're going to figure that out. We're going to play that game in real time, in interaction with each other. Right. And I am so grateful because this is exactly the play that we're all here for, right? Like when I think of friendly, ambitious nerd, it's like, A, it was friendly of us, friendly of you, friendly of me to reach out, friendly of you to like accept the invitation. It was ambitious of me to think, oh my God, this is this dude like up there in, the echelons of the internet. Like, I mean, think of it, even in terms of prolificity, I am in awe of the prolificity. Like when I think of Visa, the first thing I think of is prolificity, right? Like this guy is constantly pumping out content, he's putting out stuff. Like I hate the word content. I'm always thinking of it as art. But yeah, you're constantly creating stuff, right? Like you're generating stuff, you're like out there. So that's ambitious. And like you're nerding on stuff. This is us nerding on a bunch of stuff that we didn't even really plan about. So in a way, we're like living the epitome of friendly, ambitious nerds.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny. I pretty much say yes to almost every podcast request, unless it's so. Yeah, it depends. So these days it's a bit harder. So it used to be I just say yes to everyone. Now it's like occasionally I might ask someone if it's like their first podcast. Maybe I might say call me once you've done like several episodes, because it's frustrating if you do an episode and then they delete the podcast afterwards or they don't
Mm,
upload at all. Let's say, I mean, I don't, again, like when I had all the time in the world, that's still fine. But now it's like, okay, I have to try and prioritize. But that's for people I don't even know. Like with friends, if a friend wants to do a podcast, it's so easy. I always say yes. It's always it's fun for me as well. You know, it's not even a. So I guess I may have just contradicted myself a little bit. But like so I guess with friends, with people that I have played with before, it's always a pleasure to play again. With people
yeah,
I've never played with before, I'm like, I gotta, yeah, I gotta just do a little test to see whether we're gonna have fun or not, because I don't want it
yeah,
to be awkward for both of us. But yeah, I think people probably underestimate how much other people will say yes to things if they make an effort to show that they are serious. It's like show that they're for real, right? Not necessarily, oh, this is important or whatever. Like, no, it's just I care. I care about this, and I want to have fun, and I want you to have a good experience. Would you like to join us?
yeah,
So easy to say yes to, right? And
yeah,
everyone
yeah,
wants to say yes to something like that. It's just that I think people worry about, is it going to be weird? Am I going to be on the hook for something I don't want to be on the hook for? Am I not going to be able to say no halfway? Like, it's a bunch of those considerations. But if you can promise someone even a chance of a good time, right? And you don't need to guarantee. I guarantee you will have a great. Like, that's a bit. How do you know?
mm.
You don't know me, right? Don't. What if I want to have a bad time? You don't know. But the offer to have a good time, I think, is very easy to say yes to, especially from a friend. Yeah.
I love that, man. Because it's like, I think that's one of the reasons I actually want to do this as well. Because, like, this is a kid who's come from a smaller town in India, who's just moved into a bigger city.
Hmm.
And, he's out there, he's trying to be a friendly, ambitious nerd. And, like, he's out there, he's writing stuff, he's posting on the internet, he's prolific on Twitter. So I was curious. I was like, is this the message I'm trying to send out to someone that, there are excuses when you think of reaching out to people? Like that's the last thing I want to do, right? Like
So
I'm like,
nice.
I'm like, fuck that. We're jumping on this shit right now, right? And then like so, because this is essentially the message that I would love to leave, that at the end of the day, we're just a bunch of big grown-up kids. And it's as simple as reaching out to a kid in the playground and saying, bro, you want to play this game with me? And it's possible because you have proven it with your years of being on the internet, where you reached out to a bunch of people across the spectrum, right? Across the world. You've traveled, in fact, to different parts of the world to meet people, right? You actually meet your heroes, you meet your internet friends. And I'm like, wow, like that's the message we want to leave for the next generation. That, the more, like, that's my whole core message. I'm like, get the fuck out, like, get out of your own head, get out of your bed, get out of your comfort zone, just get the fuck out and play, right?
Yeah, that's really nice to hear it again. Like it's true, right? It's just in day to day life, you can get swept up in the details and the mess and the whatever, and then it's like when you hear it all in one, like, oh yeah, I have done that. That's true. I have done that. That's nice. It's nice to review and reminisce, like you know, and and it is there's so much possibility everywhere. Still, we're still so early to everything, So
Yeah, man.
that
Thanks so much because this is, for me, it's like, even for me personally, at a time, I'm in a time where I'm like, pretty much halfway through my life. I'm 45. I've been single, but I'm considering the fact that maybe it's time to like buddy pair. Maybe there's a possibility to actually buddy pair together. Then seeing you are an example of a rock solid buddy pair, right? Like you guys jammed up together very early
yeah,
on in your youth and you're stuck together, you're like played together, you're consistently playing together, you're moving towards a brighter future, you've added a third person to the game, right? It's a beautiful experience to witness. And it's also an example to like study or to observe. Like study is too technical a word, but observe, like, wow, look at this guy, look what he's doing, look what's happening in his life, right? And the other thing is like even from perspective of playing, like I'm raising my inner child. You are raising an actual outer child, right? And at the same time, both our paths cross. Like what insights I get by raising my inner child are insights you're getting by raising your outer child, and like, vice versa. So I mean, it's amazing for us to jam because we're essentially bouncing off ideas. I'm like, oh, I just saw Reddy running around the streets like a little kid bouncing around, like, because that's just the last thing I did on, the last week. I was just like running around, bouncing, like, doing the bunny hop, essentially doing things on the street, which is what would be perfectly normal for a little kid to do, but would be completely strange for a full-grown adult male to be doing on the streets. Like, so I was like, in my head, I'm like, hey, this is the inner child playing, let him play, right? Like, so this is the outer grown up letting my inner child get the fuck out and play. So, and then I see your videos where you're carrying your kid going around to parks and, your kid is playing and doing stuff. So, in a way, you're doing the same thing, I'm doing the same thing. And it's like, it's amazing how we are bouncing off these insights with each other on this call right now.
Yeah. It's hearing you say that you were struggling with like making the ask and then thinking about what kind of message you want to send someone else with what that's parenting, really that is, you might not think of that person as your child, but it is the shape of leadership, really. And I feel like the word leader has all these connotations. People like some people assume it's corporate, some people assume it's whatever, but like there is something, I think, like a sacred archetype of, and in there's a book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, where it uses the archetype of the king as, and that was actually related to why I used to have a king in my profile picture.
Oh, we have.
And it's it's very much the sense of sovereignty, and like the people have in their minds and their felt sense. I think even in your bodies, you have a sense of what is a good king like and what is a bad king like. And there's two kinds of bad kings. There's like the tyrants who try and dominate and tell you what to do, how to act, and they want control by coercing you. That's obviously bad. And the less obviously bad one is like the weakling who abdicates his responsibility. He's hiding behind the throne, or he's not there at all. That is a failure of leadership, right? When someone is like, I don't know what I want, I don't know what to do, I'm not gonna whatever. Like, and again, like you can live your life like that if you want, but when you see that there's this in between sweet spot between over domineering and like overly flimsy, there's this kind of sweet spot, the tension and the dance, and you see how that inspires people and inspires yourself. It's a demonstration of like healthy caring and daring at the same time, right? You care for your people, and it could be even just like a group of students in school, or it could be the people at a part-time workers in a fast food restaurant, whatever. Any cluster of people need some kind of leader, and it doesn't need to be a individual they might rotate the leader amongst themselves, whatever.
Mhm,
Somebody
mhm.
has to embody the archetype of, here's what we're working on, here's what we're going to do, here's blah blah blah. And when you decide to face your fear or your like your limiting belief of like, I can't do this because of that, and then you see, oh, here's someone else who's witnessing me be like that, I'm imparting my belief system onto him, right? He's gonna see, here's an older guy or a more experienced guy, and that's what guides his decisions. Subconsciously, they're gonna pick up on that, and you witness that, and you're like, I'm gonna choose a different path, right? I'm
Yeah.
gonna demonstrate by example that you can take risks, you can be bold. And that's just, if only every child, boy and girl, every person gets to witness. And some adults need to see this as well, right? Like you see someone demonstrating like initiative and leadership, being willing to, and again, like it's just even just being someone willing to do something is
Right.
itself an act of leadership in a way, even if no one else is watching, right? Like it's just that. And so me hearing you talk about that gives me like a lift somewhere here. Like in a way I have that, like, so my writing is always on my mind. Like my main thing in life has been my essays that I've been working on and not making a lot of progress on outwardly. I'm making internal progress, but it's,
Right.
it's just whatever. And like you are reminding me that not only is your output what people look at, the people who are really looking at you are seeing your process. They're seeing how you go about it. They're seeing, you know, are you are you stressed about it as you're doing it? And if you are teaching people that being stressed is how you get things done. And
Yeah.
I'm reflecting on how I don't want to teach that lesson to anyone else.
Mhm.
And it's a bit painful to realize that, oh shit, I have been doing that. Me agonizing over my work before I ship it, maybe it makes the work like 5% better or something in some way, but it teaches my audience that they should be stressed, and I do not want that, right? So thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, we're really teaching people all the time. Thank you so much. It's really, like you're teaching me, by teaching the other kid, and it's just, yeah, we're all teaching each other all the time, and that's
Yeah.
part of play, right? You learn by making mistakes. You learn by making mistakes. You see what someone else does, and in Singapore, it's probably the same everywhere, but like what the kids say in the playground, they don't even have a vocabulary. So it's so interesting because they don't even know a lot of words, but the words they learn are like follow me. So someone might say follow me, and then they start like marching or something, and you're like, oh, okay, that's the game. I'll follow
Yeah.
him. And then you see like 5 kids all doing that. You don't need that many words. If you follow me, you stop, start, let's, it's so simple.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's just amazing to watch.
Amazing indeed, man. Amazing.
Okay, man,
It's
I
just
gotta head off soon. So like, is there any
thanks a lot,
last
buddy.
questions, thoughts, or this is wonderful. It's great for
This
me.
is wonderful. I'm just so happy. Thanks a bunch. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to watch the journey, especially now that you have like a mini me with you. And
Yeah,
I'm so stoked to see how this is. And I'm definitely going to come down when you get your new place and you throw out your first scene. I'll come on over.
nice, nice. I'll probably, I don't know when exactly, but I might, before COVID happened, I wanted to do like an India road trip. So
Mhm.
now that's a bit less feasible. I don't know what the feasibility is. I'm probably gonna do London later this year because we have airline miles to clear. But maybe next year, or I don't know. But I do want to go to. I think I want to do Chennai, Bangalore, maybe Delhi. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
yet. But India is on the cards for me. So I'll probably see you then as well.
Awesome, buddy.
Right.
Thanks a bunch. Big hugs.
All right. Take care,
Cheerio.
man. See you around. Bye bye.
Bye, buddy.